Can you imagine how crazy it would be to have like the NYPD backing Mamdani and facing off against ICE next year?
Hello and welcome to the More Freedom Foundation podcast. I'm Murray, in charge of podcasting, and with me as always is Robert Morris. How are you this time?
Not bad, not bad. How you doing, Ray?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Fairly uneventful this week, but I was somewhere, and I want to know if you can guess where. Largest battlefield in Britain and or Ireland.
Wow, that's a great one.
Basically, British Isles, so Britain and Ireland.
So would that be like a Cromwell thing in Ireland, or
close?
William of Orange in
Yes.
Ireland? Yeah.
The Battle of the Boyne.
The Battle of the Boyne. Okay.
So I think it was 60,000 troops.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, largest battle to ever take place in Britain or Ireland.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Because, William of Orange was a continental player when he took over the British, I guess at that point would be the English crown. And one of the things he's famous for is just brutalizing Ireland.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's common for English kings to do that.
Indeed.
So apparently very big, but not too many deaths, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's just an interesting the way that sort of the scale of things just getting worse and worse between England primarily and Ireland across the 1500s and the 1600s. It just sort of...
But it's more like a weird English civil war that then takes place in Ireland.
Of course.
So, as is often these things, but shall we talk about something that might be a bit more optimistic in the future?
But Rory, you've got me started. I love talking about 1600s UK, but you know what? I don't think anybody really wants me to talk about that right now.
No, it's very interesting. There seems basically, if you're a mercenary in Europe at the time, you were involved in this battle in some way, it seems.
Yeah, it's fascinating just how that all worked, how like a Dutch guy ended up as the King of England and
replacing a French guy.
Yeah, and because of that was able to sort of more viciously consolidate, though Cromwell was already quite viciously consolidating.
No, he was fighting
English
against King James II.
What's that?
William was fighting against King James II.
Yes, and so was Oliver Cromwell. I mean, that's so James II's sort of, maybe kind of Catholicism was a big part of that whole process. But yes, perhaps we don't need to get into the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution at this point, especially because we're finally talking about, I think, a topic that folks are pretty interested in, which is local news for me. I am now looking out my window at the neighborhood in which Zoran Mamdani grew up.
Sorry, the way you looked out the window was as if he was outside.
Yeah, and here's Zoran. No, I'm afraid not. So I'm looking at Morningside Heights, and if I had a window here, which I don't, I could look at the 36th State Assembly District, which is the one that Zoran Mamdani has represented in Queens for the past 5 years.
But there's still a link with the British Empire because Uganda is where he's from. And
yes,
that is why there's a lot of Indian people in Central Africa.
Indeed. So I don't know if I'm gonna, I got really caught up in the research for this, in his parents, because it's a
they're fascinating parents, because the mother is a film director.
Mm-hmm. The mother's a film director. The father is a professor at Columbia, which sort of, as listeners of this podcast know, that we've talked at some length about what's happening to Columbia right now, sort of a lesser Ivy League school, which is also, out my window, Morningside Heights, which became the center of conflict over, essentially, the center for genocide denial in the United States, and became the excuse for the Trump administration to crack down on universities nationwide. So it's fascinating. If you wanted to write a novel of the early 20th century, Zoran Mamdani would be this, and his family would be the central character. But honestly, you wouldn't, it would be like...
too unbelievable.
It would be too like on the nose. You'd be like, oh, come on, that's just absurd. Like, I can't believe that you would, like, he is as a literary creation, like, do you know who Tom Wolfe is? He
No,
wrote a book, sort of the book of New York in the 1980s called Bonfire of the Vanities, and actually, I think they're making a
the film of it,
television what's that?
or it's a TV series.
They made a film out of it with Tom Hanks that wasn't very successful, but I think there's an ongoing TV series of another book he wrote about Atlanta called Man in Full, that's sort of prestige TV going on right now. He wrote the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, but he's sort of the guy who wrote, who went from being a journalist to trying to write the great American novel. And yet, Zoran Mamdani is like too perfect a character to fit in a Tom Wolfe novel. Like it says a lot actually about the way that elite politics in the United States used to function. Because it's not just a British Empire story. And we'll get into a little bit into Mahmoud Mamdani and the way that his scholarship has sort of helped to cover up the extent to which his family and the U.S. empire has been, such an extraordinary thing. And what's interesting about living in this era where the Trump administration is using, supposed fears about anti-Semitism to be more honest about what the whole anti-Semitism panic has been about. It's about genocide denial. Using those to crush, to make it impossible for Zoran Mamdani's to happen. And the fact that American empire, when it was strong, when it wasn't, this cowardly fascist mismatch. Not that it wasn't already brutal and genocidal
Yeah.
in the mid-20th century, but when it was strong and confident and was on an upward trajectory, this was the kind of thing that we were strong enough to foster and enjoy. We understood that even if, some of these folks were critical, it was in service to U.S. empire and U.S. power and U.S. legitimacy if we sort of sponsored the creation of sort of this global 5%, which is definitely what Zoran Mamdani comes from. I want to just quickly at the outset, because questions of privilege have been a big deal between, in the ongoing campaign that is somehow still going on between
Yes,
Mamdani
despite that
and
he
Cuomo.
won the Democratic vote.
Yes, despite Cuomo getting his clock cleaned, he's got a lot of consultants who need to get paid, so he's continuing to run. And privilege is coming up as like a big thing here. So when I say that
So is he running as an independent, Cuomo?
I guess that's probably the case. Yeah, I suppose. He's the Trump Democrats. I don't know. But so that privilege has come to be like a big thing that's mentioned a lot. But I want to be clear, like Mamdani is not wealthy. Like Mamdani and his family are not like
They're like
rich.
I would describe them as a very academic family and,
Yeah.
very middle class in a sort of more British sense of the word.
I mean, I'm sure they're millionaires. His mom directed one of the better regarded, films of the early 1990s. It wasn't a big success, but like I'm sure they are, they probably own, their apartment in Morningside Heights is probably worth a couple
Mhm.
$1 million. They probably have a summer home, but these are like $10 million people. Andrew Cuomo and his family, these are like 100 million people, $100 million people. And the idea that he can call out Mamdani for being privileged is absolutely
It
nonsense.
also reminds me of the advertising lately, because Mondani's famously walking around all of New York talking to random New Yorkers.
Did you get a chance to vote on Tuesday?
I didn't vote
And why did you not vote?
because I don't believe in the system anymore.
And Cuomo was doing his own thing where he was
Yeah.
rolling up his sleeves and he changed the battery in his own car, and it was like one of the poshest neighborhoods in New York.
But as my grandfather used to say, when you get knocked down, learn the lesson and pick yourself back up and get in the game.
Well, it was mostly the Upper East Side, which is I can see out my window looking down, which is it's actually where I grew up. Yeah, traditionally a affluent neighborhood, and it's still a very it's actually one of the cheaper neighborhoods in Manhattan now, which
Okay.
is an interesting dynamic we can talk about. Sorry, it's in one of the cheaper neighborhoods in Manhattan, like around Central Park and below. There are cheaper neighborhoods as you go further up Manhattan Island, but we probably don't need to get too far into Manhattan real estate. But what I think is interesting about his family is the idea that Mamdani's family is privileged or wealthy by the scale of the United States is frankly nonsense. He's, he is, definitely top 10% of the United States in terms of wealth and income. These are comfortably off people. Mamdani is always very straight up about, he's had a charmed life of, he didn't have to pay for his own schooling, which is
And
a
his
big
rap
marker of
career.
Yes, of course. And he had a rap career. This is a big marker of class in the United States, even though we don't like to talk about it, whether or not you had to pay for your own schooling. That said, though, his parents are part of sort of a global 5%, or I want to say a global 1%, which is something that's actually a key tool of the legitimation of U.S. empire that Donald Trump is right now destroying, which is this idea that, like, well, we have these elite institutions and the leaders of our country, all these little plutocrats and centimillionaires and the children of billionaires go to these schools, and Columbia is still barely very much one of those. They get to go to these schools, these Ivy League schools, Harvard and Yale and Princeton, and then Columbia and Penn in like a lower tier, and MIT and Brown or whatever. And they go to school with the elites of everybody in the world. That's part of setting up. The fact that, I think, didn't Xi Jinping send his daughter to Harvard? Like, that's part of U.S. empire. That's a key part of U.S. empire. And you can see this in these two figures that are the parents of Zoran Mamdani. I was really fascinated. I was like vaguely aware of this, but this morning I got very caught up in researching the connection between Zoran Mamdani and Denzel Washington, which is kind of a fun thing.
Okay.
Denzel Washington, for those of you who may not be aware, is like has been for my lifetime, or at least, since I was a kid, the premier African-American actor in the United States. He was also, I mean, less so now, the man is 70, but, in the 80s and 90s, this guy was top tier sex symbol. This was Denzel Washington. And one of the films at the core of Denzel Washington as a sex symbol is Mississippi Masala.
It's a long way from India to Mississippi.
I'm a mixed masala.
Hot and spicy, huh?
Academy Award winner Denzel Washington.
I ain't no saint.
Which is the claim to fame, it seems like the most successful film by one Billionaire, who is the mother of Zoran Mamdani. And in fact, she met her second husband, the father of Zoran Mamdani, Mahmoud Mamdani, in Uganda when she was researching Mississippi Masala. So it's so Denzel Washington's one aspect. So Denzel Washington was already an Oscar-winning actor when he was in Mississippi Masala in 1991. But in some aspects of Denzel Washington's fame, as a heartthrob or what have you, and Zoran Mandani come quite literally from the same place, which is the pairing of Billionaire and Mahmoud Mamdani, which I found vaguely amusing. In a sort of U.S. pop cultural thing. What's interesting, there's so much interesting about Mahmoud Mamdani and Billionaire. Mahmoud Mamdani, born in 1946, Billionaire in 1957. They were both born in India. And it seems to me that they were both, certainly Billionaire, and I think very likely Mahmoud Mamdani as well, absurdly privileged in the context of India. Just very, very wealthy people. Mahmoud Mamdani is a Gujarati Muslim. Another good example of that would be Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, who was a famously upper crust. I don't know where Mahmoud Mamdani's family was situated. I know Ali Jinnah's family was situated at the absolute top. Ali Jinnah was the famous founder of Pakistan who liked to drink and was like more Oxbridge than most of the people who went to Oxford and Cambridge or what have you. Mahmoud Mamdani's family, apparently wasn't that privileged and wealthy because they, had to go to Tanzania. And eventually, I think Zoran's father grew up in Uganda. Formative event for Mamdani would be 1972. Idi Amin booted most of the Southeast Asian population out of Uganda as a nationalist thing. It's interesting, to what I don't know enough about the intricacies of that story because, there is a Jewish population in Germany after the Holocaust or what have you, and I'm not saying that what Idi Amin did is on the same scale as the Holocaust, but my understanding is that most people of Indian extraction were forced out of Uganda 20 years before Mamdani.
I always remember that scene from The Last King of Scotland is basically just...
Would you like to get all Asians out, really, sir?
Yes, they must go to their country.
Even nationals of Uganda?
If they want to go, they are welcome to go.
What will happen to these people if they don't go by the time they're in?
I think they will be sitting like they are sitting on the fire.
Yeah, and I think that's more or less what happened. I don't know what the relationship with the post Idi Amin Ugandan government was. You know, some people came back, and it does seem to me that Mamdani seemed to have still been living a life in Uganda and for long enough for. But I don't know
Apparently,
if that was.
recently they've started welcoming back Indians and trying to repatriate their land and stuff like that.
Well, what's fascinating about Zoran's hip-hop career, I spent too much time this morning watching his videos. I actually downloaded a few because, I mean, there is, basically the whole, Cuomo campaign and every, opposition to Mamdani is, really sleeping on some great ammunition in these hip-hop videos.
Well, the joke is when people try to attack him, they keep saying all these things that sound really good, like, oh, he wants to lower your rent and tax billionaires. It's like, yeah, what's wrong with him?
Well, yeah, I mean, they are failing miserably because we're in a period of almost complete elite, as we'll talk about a lot in the next episode.
The main one
instead of
seems to be,
Trump-
he hates Israel, I keep hearing.
Yes, that is a key part of it. But we're in a point of almost complete elite discreditation or delegitimation. So yeah, all the stuff that they like to throw at him is, it bounces off because most people are like, yeah, there's a genocide. And it's really disgusting that our president and most of our media organizations are supporting it. This is obvious to people who haven't had their brain washed by various baby boomer media sources. But yeah, these series of rap videos, what's a really fascinating dynamic of that is he's got a partnership with a Black African Ugandan. I mean, that's sort of, he's in a super group or whatever. And it's very interesting that, yeah, this is a hip hop thing, which is easy to be scurrilous about and diminish. And I really do think there's great clips and visuals that the opposition to Zoran should be using. What's interesting is it's clearly in service to a family political project, which is legitimating the Southeast Asian or Indian role in Uganda. So it's fascinating, frankly, and it's very laudable. It's this is a population that was, I don't know if I don't think ethnically cleansed is too strong a term. There was.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
There was not, it doesn't appear like there was too much violence or at least actual murder involved here, but this was a country that attempted to completely remove a population. And it's very, so Mamdani's hip hop career is sort of mocked or whatnot, but it's actually a very moving and interesting project that he is doing to attempt to reconcile different strands of Ugandan citizenship or Ugandan culture. So yeah, I mean, it's this really, really interesting thing that is very much comes out of the work of his mother and father. So yeah, Billionaire is unquestionably to me. So she went to a very high-toned high school in India, went to one of the highest-toned universities in India, and then transferred to Harvard. And it's just fascinating in her biographies, just trying to illustrate. Okay, I'm sorry. So she just transferred from an Indian university to Harvard in the 1970s. This is.
Did she win a scholarship,
obviously-
or what way did
What's
it work?
that?
Because I think her Mandani's father won a scholarship, and that's how he got to America.
Sure, yeah, she had a scholarship, but she had a scholarship, but she had the resources sitting in India to apply for that scholarship, in India in the 1970s. So, I can't speak. I have the sense that Mahmoud Mamdani was part of a traditional commercial elite, sort of the Shia Muslims of Gujarat, but I can't testify to where he is in that standard. Maybe he really was just phenomenally hardworking and came up from a more hardscrabble background to end up being, he was also Harvard educated to some extent. But Billionaire, you don't transfer into Harvard as an undergrad without extraordinary privilege. I certainly don't see Mamdani and his family as wealthy by US standards, but it's very clear to me that this is a woman of extraordinary privilege in India who came over to the United States in the 1970s and has largely, she was married to a white guy. That's great, but she's an American to me, or rather she's an Indian who leveraged her her Indian privilege to, come be in America. And this is what I'm talking about, that global 1% that sort of serves U.S. empire and is like a tremendously...
Quite the internationalist.
Yeah, a tremendously valuable tool of a confident and strong empire that is being trashed by the cowardly, weak, fascist Trump version of this empire.
So you're saying that it's interesting that something that felt like it was created by a confident America is now being challenged and maybe reshaped by the Sun, when America is now in a more cowardly sort of isolationist phase?
Well, it would be very interesting if the Sun, sort of someone that came out of this milieu was sort of the catalyst for being like a savior of an older, better, stronger U.S. empire, as opposed to this sort of cowardly Reaganite, rich loser. The product, as I think we're going to talk about in the next episode, just the swamp of weak billionaires that we're surrounded by.
The swamp's being drained, Rob.
No, it just intellectually weak as business people. Just garbage, hot garbage. The wreckage of the U.S. mediascape and businesscape of just weak cowards is what the billionaire class of the United States is made up of now, and that is filtered down to the leadership of most of our institutions. But anyway, that's a rant for next week. So what's interesting, so that this is the mother who went to Uganda to research a film that was very successful and is a key part of Denzel Washington's career. It's just a very interesting artifact of the 1990s. I have not watched it. I now intend to watch it at some point this fall. But I remember it being culturally significant as a kid in the early 1990s. And apparently in researching this in Uganda, she met Mahmoud Mamdani, who was already an academic. Much has been made about like, oh, this is an America-hating academic. Again, by the stupid and the weak, by the people. This is a species of, people who were running a more functional U.S. empire understood that you get the critics here, at Columbia, you get the critics here, in our elite institutions. You can defang that criticism, but you can also learn from that criticism and,
take some of it on board and improve yourself.
Exactly. And but yeah, like we now live in the world of cowardly chicken. So it's like, oh, you hate America. No, no, no. So much is made of Mahmoud Mamdani's, and it just, this stark contrast. I mean, he's at Columbia. And Columbia, the people who run Columbia now are just the personification of cowardice. The people who are trying to weaponize anti-Semitism for genocide denial, and in the process have essentially murdered their own institution. Basically, gave it up to Trump, and in the process also gave Trump the ammunition to go after every university campus in the country. So really, just really like. The term, I actually use this in public, not, I use this and I felt a little bad about it, but Vichy on the Hudson, I think, is a good way to refer to Columbia University. Vichy being the French collaborationist regime with the Nazis. That's kind of how I see Columbia today. And it's shocking because like 20, 30 years ago, Columbia was one of the best exponents of this stronger version of U.S. empire, this more confident version of U.S. empire that was quite happy to incorporate its critics. And this is an amazing detail. So Mahmoud Mamdani, I probably helped very much by the fact that he married a glamorous film director who, was on a first-name basis with Denzel Washington, was able to get a seat at Columbia around the turn of the century. And this is where Zoran Mandani moves to New York City as a 6 or 7-year-old, moved to Morningside Heights, which is where Columbia University is based. And he gets this job at Columbia where he sort of does his post-colonial stuff. And this was just an amazing detail to me. He is, to this day, the Herbert Lehman Professor of International blah, 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 blah. Herbert Lehman is the first Jewish governor of New York City, a famous ally of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Truly like a heroic figure, like a really impressive guy. Also, but this is like a Jewish American hero, and it's interesting that the Mamdani family is now like a hate figure for the pro-genocide contingents in the United States of, sadly, the pro-genocide aspects of sort of, Jewish America or what have you. This guy is like, this family and its approach to things is like, the bête noire, but like it's the Herbert Lehman professor. Like this guy's endowed by Lehman Brothers with which is a famous bank and yes, Herbert Lehman, the first Jewish governor of New York, the famous ally of FDR in the New Deal, was from the Lehman Brothers banking family. And it's just fascinating to me. It's just a sign of such an incredible plummet that this guy's now a hate figure when in the middle of the 20th century, the United States, Jewish America more broadly was like, and Columbia is the most Jewish of the Ivy Leagues because of its location in New York City, which is, one of the most Jewish of American cities. And it's such a sign of such a great fall. And I do feel bad that we're like halfway through and we're still talking about Mamdani's parents, but I just found that so fascinating. And it's kind of interesting, like, talking about like the way that this sort of global 1% functions to serve the United States. Mamdani's work at Columbia is all about how post-independence failure is rooted in the colonial experience and it's the fault of the European empires. And I agree with that to some extent. I think it's interesting. I think it's worth paying attention to. But really, it's kind of hiding the ball for what I believe is the real reason behind post-independence failure, which is basically the oil crisis, which was sparked by the United States, and then the U.S. response to it, which was the Volcker shock of dramatically hiking up interest rates. So basically, it's interesting, like this post-colonialism thing is like, oh, wow, he hates white people, but he's also professionally covering for what the U.S. government did. Mm-hmm. Sure, yes, absolutely, there are bad things about the post-independence Africa has inherited from the colonial European regimes, but like some of them were doing pretty okay, like in the 1960s or whatnot, until the oil crisis slammed them. And then what the Federal Reserve Chair did to world interest rates slammed them in the 80s. And it's like, sure, he's blaming Europe or whatever, but he's also just letting the United States off the hook. So it's kind of interesting how that's how it works. That's like why you keep the critics inside, because you can just subtly influence them. And basically because we have such... Basically, because the Reagan era has made our class of leadership and wealthy people so weak and stupid, they've had too easy a time of it. All of these things are sort of falling apart. And that gets us to actually, Mamdani. I mean, let me say, like, Mamdani lived internationally and then moved to New York City at the age of 7, which makes him like the ideal New Yorker. Like, I don't actually,
So has he been there longer than you?
Certainly. Well, actually, yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I lived here in the city from until I was 9, and then I moved back here when I was 38, and I'm 40. So yeah, so probably something like that. But importantly, he's gone to at least middle school here, high school here. Mamdani was a talented kid, but not that talented a kid. So he went to Bronx Science, which is one of the most prestigious. New York City is rare among U.S. cities in that it's an inner city that continued to be populated. It is in most urban environments in the United States, the best high school is usually some private high school. That is not the case. In New York City, we still have 3 or 4 really prestigious high schools, sort of secondary education. Bronx Science is among them. So, I mean, he grew up in Morningside Heights, and then he went to Bronx Science, which is, like a ways away, because it was, a really prestigious school. So he went there, but I can infer that he didn't do that great. I mean, he did okay, but he went to Bowdoin, which is sort of it's probably like in the top 100 schools in the United States, but it's kind of like a liberal arts school for rich kids. It's not a bad place to go to school, but it's not like a great place to go to school.
But does this also show that while he's, families connected, they're not like super connected?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Yeah. His mom knows Denzel Washington and he couldn't get into Harvard. Like, both his parents went to Harvard. His dad's a professor at Columbia. Like, yeah, so he's probably kind of a fuck up at Bronx Science, but like he went to Bowdoin, which is like a perfectly solid university to go to. And I think this is a pretty valid critique of Zoran Mamdani. This guy, like, didn't do much before getting into politics. Like, because like he finished Bowdoin at 2014. Did like I started this YouTube channel in 2014, or like I started doing this full time in 2014. Like, so he didn't do much, but he's accomplished a hell of a lot more than I have in the past 10 years, that's for sure. But like, he didn't, it's kind of hard to put together the chronology here. In 2014, he finished Bowdoin. He was apparently working as a foreclosure counselor or something like that, which is, right down the middle of what he won his campaign on. He won this campaign talking about affordability issues in New York City. It's clear that he had some kind of role as a foreclosure counselor, helping people who were dealing with, getting evicted or whatnot. And, he's talking about the rent constantly. He understands these issues, I think, with an intimacy that Andrew Cuomo has demonstrated very clearly in the past month, has no fucking idea what he's talking
But
about.
that's another thing is he answers questions. Like when people ask him, he gives, it's a good chunk of an answer. It doesn't sort of ramble too much. And it seems to give a distinct answer, which a lot of politicians these days just give very wish-washy politician-y answers. So it does show that, his key thing is like, I know this inside out. Don't challenge me on it.
He knows his deal there, but it's interesting. So yeah, he finishes in 2014, finishes university at like normal time at the age of 23. In 2017, he was running a city council campaign, like a campaign manager. In 2018, he was running a state senate campaign. I mean, this is kind of an interesting, I know there's a lot of much younger folks who listen to this podcast. This is kind of an interesting path to power or what have you. He was able to be a 20-something campaign manager for these campaigns is because they were kind of like no-hope campaigns. They were like sort of like there was like a left-wing journalist in a primary, and then I remember hearing about this guy, really interesting, I think Christian Palestinian guy running for the city council. Neither of these folks were likely to actually get to power, but Mamdani went and worked for these guys and built up a lot of really valuable experiences how New York politics works. Like he's known these neighborhoods for a long time and knows them intimately. He also had this rap career.
I remember hearing about like his income, and one of the things was like, and he gets royalties from his rap career, and I was like, I'm sure it's not a lot, but it's probably a lot more now.
It's not. Yeah, I do. That'd be a fascinating thing to look at, like the stats on those
On the
YouTube
Spotify
videos,
and
like,
stuff.
yeah, why? I mean, they're not even the biggest one. Like there's still fewer views than some of my videos. Anyway, but they are kind of interesting. I think it is a valid critique, however, if you look at the period from 2014 to 2020, and it's like this kid didn't really have a job, like his being the campaign manager for No Hope Socialists campaigns in New York City, I assume he was making like
Nothing.
Foreclosure counselor, I haven't actually seen anywhere what entity he was working for. Yeah, like maybe you could make like 40 grand a year doing that in New York City, which is nothing.
Well, yeah, I think 40 grand a year is like average wage in America.
Well, in New York City, it's poverty wage.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. And then he also was like spending a bunch of time in Uganda to like form a rap career. Like, and it's clear that this guy is like a social wonderkin. Like, to what degree did he, like, how much time did he have to spend in Uganda to like build the connections to like form a rap group and be making videos and like, I mean, or like, did he just show up with like $3 grand and that was enough to like astroturf all this? Like, I don't know. But it is like, I do think that I think he's been upfront about this. I don't think he's been, I don't think he makes any great claims to have like, pulled himself up by his bootstraps or whatnot. But if you look at this period between 2014 and 2020, it is absolutely a young man of privilege using, I assume, a significant amount of parental resources and networks to sort of build himself up in a certain direction. That said, the man is an immense talent and an immensely hard worker.
I think we've talked about before, especially in roles like this where you're publicly facing. I've said about actors about when people talk about nepo babies, is like it'll open the doors, but your own talent has to keep those doors open, and he's definitely
Exactly.
shown that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's extraordinary, and a lot of this is like the time, just he's just sort of perfectly suited for the times that he's been in. When he was coming up, I would say we were sort of, I guess he sort of came up in the aftermath of the Bloomberg era. Bloomberg is a tremendously formative mayor for New York City, controversial, very obviously, is he now a centibillionaire?
Wow.
But yeah, like hugely wealthy person. I never wanted him to be president because I figured he would be too powerful as president, frankly. But he was a good, to my mind, he was a good mayor of New York. There's a lot of, as Mamdani is about to discover, there are a lot of obstacles that the New York mayor faces, has some interesting powers, has, I think, the power to motivate and, generate publicity that I think Mamdani could do amazing things with potentially. But generally, you can end up pretty stymied and shut down if you don't play your cards right. Bloomberg didn't matter.
Yeah.
He was a billionaire. If somebody told him no, he said, fine, I'll set up a foundation that'll make it happen. If the city council wants to get in the way, cool. I'll get some of my buddies to fund somebody to kick you out. Or I'll put together like a whole, astroturfed grassroots movement to get what I want to get done. And I think it did some pretty interesting things for the city. Mamdani came up in the era of de Blasio, who, after the Adams era that we are just ending, I think there's been a lot of retrospective reappreciations of de Blasio. But de Blasio was sort of definitely a much more left-leaning guy who did not have billions of dollars to throw towards his pet projects. And I think is certainly seen as more of a failed mayor than Bloomberg. And I'm sure for a lot of folks like Mamdani, growing up in the commie corridor, which is have you heard of this? The commie
No.
corridor? This is now reflected very much in the electoral maps that elected Mamdani. Have you ever heard of the concept of elite overproduction?
Never.
It's a classic. I'm not sure how I feel about the concept. It's sort of comes from a place of like, well, most people should be working in the mines, sort of attitude. But the idea is that most revolutions come about when you've got too many heavily educated people who don't have jobs.
Okay.
And that's elite overproduction. And I think it's, to a degree, fair to describe a lot of the neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens. So there's Manhattan Island, and then there are the two boroughs that are on Long Island. I call them the Long Island boroughs, and everybody in Brooklyn and Queens hates me when I do that because Long Island has a whole bunch of different connotations. So basically what I'm saying is the Brooklyn and Queens people who don't like to be told that they're from Long Island are just bigoted against Italians, but that's a different story.
Okay.
Anyway, so Brooklyn and Queens, the Long Island boroughs, face Manhattan, and there's this corridor of previously more affordable neighborhoods going down the coast of Brooklyn and Queens from Astoria to Sunset Park that used to be more affordable and now is not, that is filled with a lot of trustafarians, for sure, but also a lot of people who don't have trust funds and a lot of like hardworking people who are like just trying to make New York work and are realizing that actually it doesn't work out so well. So they are basically very educated folks, generally with more left-leaning ideology, who have found that it's really hard to get ahead because, I mean, New York City is losing all of the old, like, media, just gone. Like, I mean...
But that's just to give an example, the exact same thing's happening in Hollywood. Like, a lot of stuff's filmed in Georgia, or like, I think the only thing in Hollywood, California these days is that Warner Brothers a lot, and the rest is all the executives live there. So it's something we are seeing a decentralization of power in multiple fields.
Of course. And it's just, I mean, sure, like all the big media organizations still have headquarters here, but they're becoming less and less powerful. Like the newsrooms of the big networks are now just sort of corporate subsidiaries.
And then less jobs for normal people in those industries in New York.
Exactly. And, finance, and yet things, because New York is such a hub for the international wealthy, housing costs go up even though they're fewer decent jobs. So that's sort of where you get the commie corridor, which is this sort of very educated and very angry group of folks. This is where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez comes from.
Okay.
Importantly, this is sort of the soup that Mamdani comes out of. When he's trying to make it in New York City politics, it's all about opposition to Trump, because this is 2017 to 2021, the first Trump term. De Blasio is the left-wing mayor of New York City, but he's sort of famously kind of a flop. He got a lot of interesting things done, but he's no Bloomberg, and he was probably very disappointing to the Democratic Socialists of America, of which Mamdani is still a member. This was sort of, so this is the ferment out of which we get Mamdani. And incredibly, in 2020, as a 28-year-old, he makes it into the State Assembly of New York. This is a dynamic that's very important if Mamdani is eventually going to be the mayor of New York City, is that New York City kind of has two governing bodies. It's got the New York City Council and the mayor, and then it's got the New York state government. I did the math earlier today. There's like 19 million people in New York State, 8 million people in New York City. And then there's another 2 million people in the other Long Island counties.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's another 3 million people in Nassau and Suffolk counties, another million people in Westchester County, probably another million people in the downstate. So that's like 3. So yeah, almost 20 million people, and say 13, 14 million of those people are directly linked to New York City.
But yeah, New York State's surprisingly large, because you just keep thinking about New York City itself.
Exactly. So it's there's this weird set of interest groups and a lot of Republicans that sort of show up in Albany, just because, but a lot of farms out there, a lot of. I was talking with a friend earlier. A lot of cults, a lot of weird religious. No, I mean the state of New York has this incredible history of in the First and the Second Great Awakening, and being the home of all this religious diversity. I can't remember. I was going to check it. I think maybe even the Mormons might come from upstate New York initially. Then they moved to Illinois. Then they moved to Utah, what have you. Sure, where Joseph Smith is from, if that's New York or if it's somewhere else. But it's there's a lot of land up there and not a lot of people. And New York is, I don't know, it's probably the 5th or 6th state by landmass. It's a very big state with not a lot going on. And then up in Albany, the capital of New York, there is a state government with 2 houses, like a state senate and a state assembly and a governor. And these folks care a lot about the rest of New York State, and they'll talk about, and they definitely want to spend money throughout the rest of the state, and they want to keep everybody happy. But fundamentally, most of what they do is govern New York City. This is the state government. So that's what, So Mamdani, in 2020, gets elected for the 36th district of New York State. He becomes a state assemblyman. And that's Astoria Heights, and Ditmars Steinway, which is basically the top of the commie corridor, that sort of coastline of Queens going down, across from Manhattan Island, where the jobs used to be. He goes to Albany, and he's been, it's interesting. There are aspects of his politics that have definitely changed since 2020. He has distanced himself from a lot of, I don't know that he was ever that mired in sort of woke stuff. The woke identity stuff, I would argue, was primarily for politicians who wanted to avoid actually changing anything for the better.
Yeah, they could just hire a few people that tick some boxes and it looked like they were helping the average person when in reality they weren't.
Well, I think what was the classic, wasn't there some classic Hillary Clinton line? And she was like, what was it?
Very Hillary Clinton.
No, there was some classic Hillary Clinton line that was I can't, I'm not, this isn't exactly what it was, but it's
if we broke up the big banks tomorrow, and I will, if they deserve it, if they pose a systemic risk, I will, would that end racism? No. Would that end sexism? No. Would that end discrimination against the LGBT community?
That's what wokeness fundamentally was. And I'm sure, and he definitely, Mamdani, took some 2020. We've talked a lot about how in 2020 with Trump and the Democratic primary, a lot of politicians said a lot of stuff that got a lot more left-wing than they wanted it to be in later elections. Sure, Mamdani participated in that, and he definitely went in big for the abolish the police stuff that he is now backing off of. or has backed off entirely. But, he wasn't so woke because he was like mostly like, oh, here are concrete things we can do to change things and make things better. And he appears to have been, you can go back and forth, like how valuable being in the state government of New York is. But it does appear, at least according to his Wikipedia page, and if it wasn't the case, I'm sure that Cuomo would have come around to this and made it a bigger talking point. He appears to have been one of the more dedicated folks there. He has attended, most of the sessions. He has introduced dozens of pieces of legislation, gotten a few into law. He's co-sponsored over 100 pieces of legislation. He's doing the work. And it's mostly around the things that he's made a priority in his campaign, talking about transport, making transport cheaper.
So when people say buses can never be free, don't ask them to take a hike. Ask them to take the ferry. On June 24th, let's get some more free transit.
Making New York City more affordable.
Unless you're wealthy, it's basically impossible to find or stay in a home that you can afford. It's time city government actually did something about this.
Talking about Mamdani's radicalism is a bit ridiculous. There is one radical aspect of his politics.
Well, if you don't hear anything he ever says or is interviewed, if you only hear people talk about him on Fox, it's like, well, he's Muslim and apparently he hates Israel and he's done all these horrible things and he's a communist. But yeah, when you hear him talk, it's a bit like, well, we used to do this in the state and we used to, neighboring states are taxing rich people at this rate, so we're just catching up. Like, he's able to just bring it like, oh, okay, these are just normal things we can implement. It's not crazy pie in the sky stuff.
Exactly. And it's not just Fox News, it's MSNBC and CNN who are like talking about, oh, this radical socialist.
Oh, yeah, but CNN will actually have him on and let him talk while Fox isn't so interested in that.
No. And it's not radical stuff. It's basic problem solving that we desperately need that has been gummed up by oligarchy for quite some time.
Is it shocking that a lot of these fairly basic things that New York has done in the past are now seen as crazy radicals?
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's disappointing is what it is. So just to be clear, the main thing he's promising is a rent freeze, and that is not a rent freeze for all apartments in New York City. It is only for a certain category of apartments which are rent stabilized.
I know, just as someone who's never been to New York, but like that was the reason. Was it Monica or Rachel's house in Friends? They were able to live there was because of rent freeze. So this is a thing that's New York's done in the past and will probably do again.
So rent stabilization is a permanent thing, which means there's a whole board that determines how much landlords can raise rents in a given year or something like that. And there's different classes. There's actually rent controlled, which I think is very few apartments anymore. It's an older policy. And then there's rent stabilized, which is, I think, like a 1960s policy. I think it's around 1 million apartments. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Out of, I don't know, 5 or 6 million dwelling units in New York City. I don't know I haven't looked at the actual numbers in the past couple of months. So de Blasio did a rent freeze. And so this idea that like this is some radical, crazy idea is nonsense. Most of the things, crucially, he wants to make the buses free. And as a state assembly person, he played a role in helping to make the buses free.
And I think buses have been free in other cities in America as well.
I'm sure.
I remember when he was asked about it, he was like, "Oh, they do it in this other city, and it's fine."
Mm-hmm. Well, he did a pilot, so he helped to put together a pilot program, which lasted for a couple months on a couple number of routes. Apparently, had extraordinary results in terms of ridership went up a ton, and violence against bus drivers went down massively. Like positive effects. So he's like done the work of like trying these things out. People talk about, the free grocery stores. Like he wants to open 5 grocery stores that are city owned. The city apparently already owns some to some extent. Like he just wants to try things. And this is at the heart of classic liberalism, not like leftism or socialism. This is
also in one of the richest, most powerful cities on earth.
Yeah, like we can afford to try some
to say maybe we'll have 4 grocery stores.
Yeah, it's the reaction is insane and outsized. And it's, yes, it is largely because he has put forth and stuck to a basic acknowledgement of the humanity of Palestinian people.
Also because he wants to increase a 2% tax on people earning over $1 million in a year.
So he's not going to be able to do that. So that's sort of an important thing. So, and I think that's an important thing about the radicalism of like, just try it. Like I am like Mamdani, a fairly privileged, not so young man, and like I would potentially be hurt by more socialist policies. I would support Mamdani even if there were a chance of him bringing those policies about, but like. He's going to be able to do a rent freeze, which de Blasio had done. He's going to be able to maybe do some pilot programs and stuff, depending on how he manages the city council and a variety of other factors. Because of that dynamic I was talking about, where New York City has two governments and the state government is very much the more powerful one. The governor has already said there will be no new taxes in New York. And if the governor says that, the mayor is out of luck.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and also he wants to do a lot about transit, and it's interesting that he's been focusing more on the buses now because I think that's something that he has more direct control over, because the Metropolitan Transit Authority, which covers all the subways and the buses, in fact, but I think buses are just a little more manageable and a lot cheaper and like a smaller part and like a smaller thing to make those free. That's also like a statewide authority. Sure, there are some levers he can try to pull, but if the governor Kathy Hochul isn't backing his play is not going to succeed.
Because his big thing is basically, I'll increase this 2% tax. I'll move, corporation tax from 9 to 11%. And then everything I want can be paid for by that quite easily. So, but you're basically saying he isn't going to be able to get the money to do a lot of what he hopes to?
Well, it depends. Like and I think that's the really interesting dynamic is so this guy is, who knows? I mean, our weak and stupid billionaires are pouring tens of millions of dollars into trying to get Cuomo or Adams. And just as an indicator of how weak and stupid they are. Yeah, just as an indicator of how weak and stupid they are, they're running 3 separate guys against him.
Yeah,
like these.
But is it because
like,
they have?
Let's talk a second about like our modern smoke-filled rooms, like our Bill Ackmans. Like, what a bunch of losers. Like, would J.P. Morgan have been like, yeah, I'm gonna run free egomaniac schmucks against this guy I want to take out? Like, no, like a real class of billionaires would be able to tell, like, their obvious billionaire pawns, like Cuomo and Sliwa and Adams, like, 2 of you guys knock it off so we can beat this guy. But they're so weak that they are like, at the mercy of these budget sociopaths.
Oh, because I thought it was like each of them has such a strong ego. They all think, oh, well, I'll do it. So they won't step aside. So you're saying it's because they're so weak, they're just throwing everything at it?
No, that's what I'm saying is they are these 3 gentlemen, the Republican nominee, Curtis Sliwa, Eric Adams, the current very disgraced mayor of New York, and Cuomo, like all 3 of these guys are egomaniacs, but like they are also like Sliwa less so. Sliwa was like kind of a novelty candidate. He's a fascinating guy that we don't have the time to get into, like a vigilante from the 80s. But Cuomo and Adams are famously are like fundamentally just servants of power. They are like corrupt, like Clintonite Democrats who worship money. And it's amazing that our current class of rich people is so weak and disorganized that they can't get one of these guys to drop out. Like, that's the weakness.
Yeah.
Like it's like these, like, your employees are sinking you. Like your craven, corrupt henchmen are telling you to go F yourselves. How embarrassing would it be to be Bill Ackman right now if you say, like, you can't control like 2 of the most corrupt people on the planet, Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams? Like, you can't like get one of these guys to not run? Like we have the weakest class, the dumbest class of billionaires imaginable. This is like, if you want to talk about like, weak men creating bad times or like good times creating weak men, like the good times of the Reagan era have created like the weakest billionaires imaginable. Like it's insane. Like Mamdani would lose if the anti-Mamdani vote was consolidated into one guy. And it really seems like these losers can't get it to happen. It's fascinating.
Are you optimistic for his chances of becoming mayor of New York?
Something big would have to happen for him to not win in November. That said, there are 3 months ahead.
And Trump really despises him and has talked about getting him deported.
But Trump is an idiot. If we're talking about, weak idiot billionaires, Donald Trump is an example, and he's provided a great. I mean, look at Canada. He got the Liberals reelected. And that Mamdani is savvy enough that if Trump chooses to exert himself in this election in a major way, probably going to drive up the vote for Mamdani. Trump is a really, really unpopular guy right now. And yeah, if he sends in the troops or this, that, and the other thing, one of the great, screw ups that helped in the election in June, there were a couple polls beforehand where people were like, what the heck? This guy's really accelerating up there. And the most prominent Jewish politician in New York is Brad Lander. He's currently the comptroller. He wanted to be mayor of New York, but could see that I think it seems like personally hated Andrew Cuomo enough. And also he decided to essentially do an alliance with Mamdani or what have you. So they cross-endorsed each other.
Okay.
And a week before the election, ICE arrested Brad Lander.
Oh, yes, I did see that. Was he at an ICE detention camp? And he was like, let me see this, let me see that, and they arrested him?
No, I think it was in a New York courthouse, which is even more outrageous. So he essentially was protesting loudly and what's going on here? And they took him into custody and they kept him. I don't know if they kept him overnight, but they kept him for a while. And this was extraordinary news apocalypse that made Brad Lander, who had endorsed Zoran Mandani, and Zoran Mandani himself look like stars. So that's the problem for the Trump administration at this point, is if they do something heavy-handed and brutal and stupid,
you can make him a bit of a martyr.
Yeah, if they do something heavy-handed and brutal and stupid, which is all they know how to do, and there's the media and the media apparatus, as we'll talk about next episode, the media apparatus that they rely upon is in such disarray and is just filled with bottom-feeding genocide deniers who are losing their minds when they aren't bribed by Silicon Valley morons, pimping their digital god. It's chaos, and I think the most likely result is that Mamdani wins. And I think there's sort of an optimistic and a more pessimistic take to what would happen if Mamdani were to win in November, which I think is the more likely result, though. I think we got
time to tell.
At least, yeah, anything can happen in the next 2.5 months. But he could win, and he could be obstructed he could be like the new de Blasio. And that was certainly de Blasio's great downfall, was just, he was stymied by all the wealthy people who had liked Bloomberg, because Bloomberg was a wealthy person.
Mm-hmm.
And then also famously, and this is probably the biggest lesson for Mamdani at this point, and he's doing this because he's smart, is he really needs to get in good with the New York Police Department. And that was de Blasio's great fail, is that he was not in good with the New York Police Department. And I think New York is an incredibly low crime city. And I think that, if you want to look at incredibly can you imagine how crazy it would be to have the NYPD backing Mamdani and facing off against ICE next year? That would be... that's an extraordinary possibility. That if you want to talk about positive, you want to talk about potential Civil War stuff, you want to talk about forcing a really positive change in this country, that is also a potentially really positive scenario. So what Mamdani desperately needs to do at this point is, and I think he can do, because he is so charismatic, has done such a good job building a really strong base, is that I'm sure he's already sort of made a lot of rhetorical moves towards the NYPD, but he's also got such a strong base among most of the city that leftists who will be pissed if he's friendly to police officers can't really impact much. He's distanced himself very far from the abolish the police stuff. There was it was horrible. There was a shooting at the NFL. In a downtown.
Yes, I heard about that. It was the NFL offices or something, but it was, yeah.
And one of the people killed was a off-duty New York police officer who was doing security work, which is insane. But
Oh
anyway.
yeah, I heard about this
Yeah.
whole thing where a lot of police seem to have a second job to support themselves.
And I don't think that's. I think it's
Not quite
I mean, yeah. I don't know. That's a much bigger kettle of worms that I haven't researched. But this guy was a Muslim guy from Bangladesh. This cop that I provide. I don't. I mean, I'm sure that Mamdani would have wanted to show up at the funeral, no matter who it was. But him being a Muslim Bangladeshi made it much easier for him to show up at that funeral and make a big show of how respectful and worshipful he is towards New York police officer martyrs or whatnot. So yeah, I mean, who's to say? Now there's the negative. So there's the negative impression that like Trump and the city council and Kathy Hochul, who's very much a much more old school Democrat, and all the wealthy people in New York City are going to gang up on him and make him like a joke mayor like de Blasio or even worse. Or Trump could have him killed. I don't know. Like there are all kinds of really bad scenarios, but honestly, like I'm really, really hopeful. And the extent to which Trump can stick his dumb ass into this serves to make what happens in New York more of a national issue. If you want to set up a positive contrast for U.S. politics going forward, Trump versus Mamdani, like young, wanting to do things with government, believing in people, going after oligarchs, like versus Trump, like, wow. Like, yeah, like this is, there was this did you see it seems, again, too fictional to actually work, but have you seen the tweets about the Maine Mamdani or whatever?
Maine Mandani? No.
So the state of Maine, there's Susan Collins is a famous, not so moderate Republican who somehow lasted forever up there in the Senate seat. And she now has a Democratic challenger who is a 40-year-old white guy, Navy SEAL, not a Navy SEAL, sorry, but he did multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he talks like Bernie Sanders and Mamdani.
Oh, okay.
And he is against the genocide, and talks about the oligarchy, and he talks about healthcare.
What I love most about Maine are the people. I have never met people who are more hard scrabble, even in a place that requires you to work like 2 or 3 different jobs. We have watched this state become essentially unlivable for working class people, and it makes me deeply angry. My name is Graham Plattner, and I'm running for U.S. Senate in Maine to defeat Susan Collins, a decade of military service going overseas.
It is Mamdani's playbook. It is some of Mamdani's personnel, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's just like when Mamdani won in June, everyone's like, well, this is New York and those crazy lefties. There's no broader application. And it's like, yeah, you're not gonna have a Ugandan, Indian, Islamic guy setting rural America on fire politically, but it's a very transferable model.
But is it possible that we can see the Democratic Party blow off the old dusty Hillary Clintons of this world and moving in this more Mamdani direction?
Well, it's certainly that's not what the Democratic Party wants to do.
Oh no, they're desperately kicking and screaming to stop this.
But there's a strong chance that the voters will make that happen. And like I've been reading a ton, finally almost done with my chapter in American Empire, the first 100 years, with the 1930s, and it's possible to imagine history repeating itself throughout the 1920s under Governor Al Smith, and then sort of having the torch picked up by, or perhaps ripped from him, by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a much more privileged non-immigrant politician. The state of New York went from, basically tried out the New Deal in the 1920s and the 1930s. Basically, it was like, okay, let's reformat how everything works. And then, because of the Great Depression and World War II, that model was able to be exported to the rest of the United States and created the most successful decades in American history, and also the most economically equal decades in American history, the most positive foreign policy decades. Those were shorter decades in U.S. history, defeating, the good neighbor policy, defeating Hitler, stuff like that.
Because I've heard some people saying Woodrow Wilson is quite like Biden. They're saying that like Biden tried to do a bit of money and it sort of did a bit of a thing. They think he might be a bit of a Woodrow Wilson, and then there will be the real FDR come along in a decade or two.
Oh, I like that. That's a great great parallel. And it would be, I mean, Mamdani will never be U.S. president, but and AOC won't be U.S. president in the 2020s, but in the 2030s, some other figure that could emerge in New York politics, or maybe some white guy,
Mecca Bernie.
Yes, Mecca Bernie. Some white guy using Mamdani's playbook from Idaho. I don't know.
Who was the gay Democrat you were talking about? Could be a good run for a Democratic president.
Yeah, I mean, Buttigieg is. I don't like McKinsey. I don't like Harvard. I don't like sort of glamour tours in Afghanistan, all of which are, Buttigieg's thing. But he's an extraordinary communicator. And he's young enough.
Like, he's not even in his 80s.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. That dude's not even in his 50s.
43.
But I think he's young enough that he can see the way that the worm is turning. And maybe Buttigieg will be the sort of new FDR or what have you. But it seems hopeful that interesting and innovative things are happening in New York. And while absolutely disaster is the most likely result, it's possible to see some real glimmers of hope with Mamdani, not just in his anti-genocide stance, but also in the energy that he brings to government, like the passion and the excitement. Like, if he could actually, I think elite overproduction, this theory we talked about earlier, where like in the commie corridor, it's like, well, what if he actually motivates some of these very intelligent, educated people to get into and improve New York government, to show that, in fact, to prove that, in fact, as was incredibly proved in the 1930s and has continued to be proved down to today, that actually government can do amazing things and can improve the lives of people immeasurably. Not everything has to be market-oriented and this, that, and the other thing, which has been the mantra of both Republicans and Democrats for 45 years. It's entirely possible that Mamdani crashes and burns, either this fall or in the coming years. But it's also, even if he does, I think he's a very hopeful harbinger of possibility. And perhaps that's a good place to leave it.
Yes. Leaving on a cheery note. So an optimistic future for a bright tomorrow.
Indeed.
And we will catch you next time.
The More Freedom Foundation is also available on YouTube and TikTok. Rob's Twitter is RobOLaw, and he's also written a book called Avoiding the British Empire, What It Was and How the US Can Do Better. And music provided by Kevin MacLeod.